Welcome to a presentation on behalf of the SEND Transport Commissioning Programme. My name is Lee Middleton. I'm the Senior Commissioning Officer leading the Transport Programme. This presentation is focused on the future policy. This is a copy of a presentation that has been provided to parents and carers at across 4 live public events and 3 online virtual webinars. I need to start by saying that this presentation is focused around the future policy and our early thinking around policy. If you're interested in understanding our kind of broader areas of work, there's a previous presentation round that we gave in February, and if you go to the website, which is on the letter that we've sent to all parents, so www.sendt.online, you will be able, if you scroll about halfway down that page, you will be able to find a copy of the video of the same sort of presentation as this, but the one previous that also shows you the our previous sort of wider thinking. So today is focused on our policy, and this is a presentation for our parents and carers, and we wanted to start by explaining a little bit about what is commissioning. And commissioning is, so I'm a senior commissioning manager, and I quite deliberately don't sit within either the SEND casework service or our transport service. I sit very neutral in the middle, and the team that I work with gives us, because we're in that middle place, it gives us the opportunity to explore and learn and question. And the role of commissioning is essentially to look at a service area, dissect it, understand what works very well, what could be better, what are the needs of our children and young people in this case, what are the outcomes that we wish to achieve, and then essentially work with everybody and all our partners, and our, in this case parents and carers are crucial, to reconstruct the service as a new one that is, hopefully better for everybody. So that is certainly the objective that we've set ourselves. So the objectives that we've got for today, for this presentation, I want to briefly explain to you the purpose of the SEND Transport Commissioning Programme. What's it about, what we're wanting to achieve. Gather your views on the current transport policies, and then gather your ideas for making the future of SEND transport policies fit for purpose. So we have to produce a new policy for September, and we genuinely want parents and carers involvement throughout. So the programme has 5 core goals. These are in no particular order, but they are, number 1 is around developing independence, and we're aware that everything the Council does should be promoting and developing children and young people's independence to prepare them for later in life. I always say there's a sort of caveat to that statement, in that we recognise there are, in transport there are 3,000 or so children being transported, and their needs and abilities are so different and diverse, and that's what's brilliant about SEND, isn't it? But so the promoting and developing independence is appropriate for a group of young people, but it is not appropriate for everybody, and we understand and we recognise that. So I always say, it's developing independence and where appropriate, and that where appropriate tagline is very important, and you'll hear me repeat that, I'm sure. The second point is around improving our users' experience, and I define our users, yes, as the children and young people that are in the taxi or the bus or being transported, but actually, our parents and carers are users of the service, our staff, our providers, and our wider stakeholders are all have an experience of the current transport system, and we want to work with everybody to develop and improve that system as we go forward. Our third goal is around making the system more efficient. That's around, looking at the systems and the processes, how the whole thing works, and trying to streamline that as far as possible and make that work as good as possible. I think the other way of defining efficient is around funds and cost, and making it a more cost-effective system. We spend a lot of money on SEN transport, and a lot more than most. And there is a finite amount of resource in the public sector, and so we're looking to design a system that's as efficient as possible and achieve some savings. We're looking to develop our providers, and we're asking the core question: what type of provider do we want in the future? Are our current providers, how do we develop them, and how we support them? Can we train them? Can we, help them focus on the priorities that we have as a council? And in reflection, there will be you as parents and carers. Do we want a different type of provider in the future? What sort of provider is the council going to need to deliver a different type of service? And we have to ask ourselves those key questions. We want to, and then the final one I think is almost probably the most important in a sense. It's about designing this whole thing in collaboration with others. So it's such a big and complex system, and I started working on this in October last year, and it took us months to actually get our head around the complexity and the detail. And actually, we want to design a system that works for everybody and is designed in collaboration with everybody. So you'll hear me say later on, but there's genuine opportunity for parents and carers, staff and providers, and anybody who's interested really to have a say, have a view, feed into the programme, and we take all those comments on board. And so far, some of the best suggestions that we're looking to progress have come from our parents and carers. Not surprised, but absolutely fantastic. So they're the core goals. One question I ask at all our events, I think this is just to focus the mind really, is how much do you think Surrey County Council spends on SEND transport? So this is just the cost of our providers. This is not our back office cost or our systems or process costs. This is just the budget that we spend on the delivery elements. And just take a minute or two, or a moment to reflect and think of a figure. I warn you now, it's in the millions, but come up with a figure in your head, and we'll see whether the real figure matches. Okay, so the truth of the fact is, unfortunately, that we're spending £27 million per year at the moment on SEN transport. That equates to £134,000 a day. So if you're watching this video on a school day, today in May 2017, the County Council will be spending £134,000 on average today to get your child, get children to and from school. It just equates to just under £10,000 a head. Interesting, I put this up for contrast, but our 22 special schools have a total budget of around 58 million. So, and that budget includes everything from more buildings, heating, lighting, resources, teachers, trips, activities, the works, across 22 sites. So we're spending about half of that, again, on actually transporting children, young people to and from school, which is a lot of money, and we're well aware of that. It would be wrong of me not to highlight to parents and carers the council's financial situation. I'm sure not many of you have missed the 15% potential referendum that was pursued earlier in the year, and that's a reaction to what is a very difficult financial situation for Surrey County Council. The council is absolutely dedicated and committed to its residents, but it has a finite resource, and its grants from central government, what have you, have been reducing and will cease shortly. And on average, there's around £100 million per year being saved from budgets across the organisation. Now, the organisation has prioritised children's services, social care, adult social care, and education. They are high important parts of what the council does. But none of those areas are immune to the impact of that financial reduction. So the goal of this programme is to find savings, but actually that's a sort of secondary element. It's all about improving the system and developing a system that is more effective and on the way being more cost effective. And we're quite clear that this is doable. We believe this is extremely doable now. So just to give you a snapshot of our transport in March. So in March 2017, the County Council transported 2,864 children and young people to around 279 locations from about 2,500 postcodes. 200 young people were in a wheelchair or have mobility needs. 792 children and young people have an escort. 106 children and young people are solo travel only, because their need is defined that their need that they can only travel safely and successfully on their own. We use around 1,100 contracts at the moment with providers, and we're using 102 providers to deliver that work. So what this slide just demonstrates is the kind of huge and complexity of the whole system in a sense. And every morning and afternoon there's around 1,000 vehicles on the roads in Surrey transporting children and young people to and from school, and that provides some key challenges to us. So my last sort of financial slide, but I think it's just helpful to let to compare how does Surrey cost compared to other parts of the southeast and sort of what we might call our statistical neighbours, councils of a similar nature of ours. And you'll see we're substantially higher cost per head, particularly than any other local authority in the area that we've compared here. And and we have just compared counties at this point. It's unhelpful to compare unitaries because they're just much smaller. But if you look at somewhere like Kent, they're transporting 1,300 more children, a year, and they're spending about half of what we are. So there's some big challenges for us in identifying why is that cost high, and we know why that cost is high to some extent. Yes, the cost of living in Surrey is probably higher than any of those other areas. It's not much higher than, say, Hampshire or East Sussex, and certainly in some areas, but it is high. Congestion is larger, and you can take longer to get from A to B. We also know that our schooling system provides a challenge here in that Surrey has a system of schools where most schools have a very narrow band of needs in which they can support and they meet. So I should apologise, but I always pick on Fremantle's in Woking. So Fremantle's is a fantastic ASD school. It's very specialist. It's excellent at what it does. But what that results in is actually we then transport children from all over the county to get to that school. Whereas most local authorities, within a borough, there might be 2 or 3 special schools, and maybe 90% of children's needs will be met by one of those schools. And so the journey time, the distances are much less. And Surrey has, our education system is fantastic, as we have, all our schools more or less are outstanding or good at Ofsted rating. We know our parents really value that, but there's a trade-off there in terms of the cost around our transport. So we are looking at developing work to actually see if we can broaden the types of needs in which our schools can support, so we can actually transport children less distance. This is good for children. It's good for everybody. It's good for children in that their journey times are less, so it's less tiring. It's good for communication with families. It's good for the council because the less mileage just equals less cost. It's as simple as that. So I just wanted to kind of explain that in our broadest terms. So, if we were at the live events, this would be an opportunity for you to ask questions of us. I can't really do that through a video, but you're very welcome to, at the end of this presentation, there's an email address, and you're very welcome to drop me an email with any questions or comments. Also on our website, www.sendt.online, there's a survey form for parents, ad hoc comments and feedback to be sent in. So if you're got any thoughts, any part of the way through this program, you're very welcome to fill in that form, and we will look at your comments very seriously. So I'm going to focus now on our presentation around our future transport policy, and I'm sort of health warning here. This is our early thinking and our ideas. And I've heard lots of parents come to our events and say, I've been to loads of SEND events, and it always sounds like the council's already decided what it's going to do, and you're just telling us. This is not the case in this one. We are genuinely very interested in your thoughts, your comments, your challenge to us, so that we get this right. We have not written our new policy yet. We haven't even started to draft it. We were tempted to, but actually we decided not to until we'd done the engagement with our parents and carers and given the opportunity to listen to the issues and to see how we can build those comments in. So, if I sound quite passionate about this stuff, it's because we've worked quite hard on it, but we're very keen to hear your comments and your thoughts, and absolutely nothing has been decided. I'll explain at the end the kind of next steps and what the process is from here in. So in the current situation, we have 4 main policies for transport, 2 for mainstream and 2 for SEND, one pre-16 and one post-16. We produce a parent-carer statement for SEND, and we produce a post-16 transport statement. Again, that's for all children, young people, no matter what age. The post-16 transport statement we will always continue to produce because that's something that the law requires, and it's very practical stuff like where are the bus services in Surrey, what are the train services, where can support be got for various things. So it's a kind of very practical thing to help older young people working out how they might get to college in mainstream or SEND, for example. But the top 4 policies I've listed there, they run to around 88 pages of text. They've been updated every year on year, and I think they're quite complex in a sense. And my initial reaction, having gone through these in very extreme detail, is they're not necessarily the most helpful process. And what tends to happen is the council looks at what happened in the last 12 months, the issues, the complaints, the concerns that have been raised, and then we add another paragraph to the policy for the following year. And that's fine, that's a very grand, noble thing to do, but after 10, 15 years, you end up with a document that's very long, that can be complicated and can jump around a wee bit. And cannot be as clear and crisp and provide the clarity that is helpful. So we're proposing, and we welcome your comments and thoughts on this, but we are proposing a future approach, and that we try and develop one policy for all ages in mainstream and SEND. I mean, I put a little star there. I mean, very clear around, there'll be very clear parts of the policy that need to focus on SEND. Something like 90% of the council's efforts around transport go on SEND children and young people, so the policy probably would reflect a similar, needs to reflect that to some degree. And but one document that's very clear. Now, this might take us a couple of years to get to one policy. We may end up having two in the first instance, and then we might progress. But I think we're just keen to see that there shouldn't be a difference between mainstream and SEND. The vast majority of the legislation that applies to transport applies to both mainstream and SEND. It doesn't differentiate between the two, and therefore having one policy that kind of matches the legislation and matches the responsibilities, etc., I think is most helpful. And then we would still produce that transport statement for post 16. We welcome your comments on this. We've had a really good debate with parents around this. And parents can see the benefit of it. I think they've also expressed that the concern that the policy may not include enough information for SEND families, and I think that's why we're committed to co-designing this policy with parents, so that we can make sure it's fit for purpose. The second part around our future policy approach that we're considering is actually calling it a transport assistance policy. Now, deliberately calling it an assistance policy and replacing it from a transport policy. And this is because, I put in here in green, but the law actually states that every parent has a duty to ensure their children access their appropriate education. So if you're a parent and carer and you're watching this, you have a legal responsibility to ensure your child gets to their education. And the county council has a duty to assist parents to meet that duty over 2 or 3 miles, or for mobility issues slightly different rules apply. And often what we hear from parents is, I'm entitled to this, you should do this. And actually what we're just doing is reflecting what the legislation says. And the legislation says every parent, mainstream or SEND, it doesn't differentiate, has a duty to get their children to school or college or wherever they're going. But the council has a duty to help you and assist you. But there's no real definition of assistance, and so I know of some local authorities that are saying, well, assistance could just be giving you some information. He will give you a leaflet or a booklet. We're not going to be going down that road by a long shot. We understand that actually providing practical transport assistance is vital to getting children and people to school, and Surrey is committed to raising our participation in education. So to just give you a leaflet would be pointless. So that's not an issue in Surrey. But actually there is a role in looking at what type of assistance and the different types of assistance that could be provided. And currently it's either parents do it and we may pay mileage, or the county council provides a taxi or a bus. But actually there are other ways that we could build into the system of more variety of support, and parents have asked us for that variety. And when we did our events in February, we had a very strong degree of support for our thinking. So the next slide is a little different. This is what I'm calling the 90-10 model. It's essentially trying to address the needs of children and young people more effectively. And so writing a policy document, it is a document, it'll be 10, 15 pages of text, and trying to write a policy that meets the needs of 3,000 different children and young people at any one time, I think is very hard to do, if not impossible. And I think it's almost wrong in one sense to try and write a policy document that captures everybody 100%. And I think that's the attempt that's been taken so far, and that's why our documents are as big and toomy and complicated as they are now. But what we do believe, and looking at our complaints and concerns that are raised and the comments we've heard from parents at our events, is around 90% of children probably be able to be supported quite successfully through a policy. And the policy will work very well and it'll good. But we do know there's 10%, maybe some of our more complex children or complex family situations, where actually a policy, can be a barrier to being supportive and flexible, adaptable, and meeting the needs of the child and the family. And so what we're proposing is that we implement an exceptions process. And we don't know what that's going to look like yet, but an exceptions process that says, actually, this policy isn't working for us. Please can we have a debate and a conversation? In the minimum, it would be inviting parents, carers to come in and talk to us, or we come and talk to you, and have a conversation and identify some solutions and look to implement those. And what we're looking is potentially using a sort of case law approach. So if we make a decision for a child or a family, then that would go on record, and if another family or child came along 6 months later, say, with a very similar situation, well, we go back and say, well, last time we did this, so we should be doing the same, because we're quite determined to achieve consistency across the board. But this is a bit of a departure, and because it's different in terms of saying, actually a document won't be able to necessarily meet all the needs of everybody, and a sort of computer says no approach I just don't think is intelligent enough in the modern era. So we want to try, we're looking at this 90-10% model, and we really welcome your thoughts and your comments on that, because it is very different to what I think any other local authority is looking at the moment. The next part is around developing culture and mindset change. We hear a lot, and I've read the Ofsted reports, and I was pleased to see that they highlighted transport as an area of strength. But we understand there are big challenges around culture and mindsets in Surrey, and we're looking at how we can progress that. So, policy has a role around our service staff and our processes, and making those, designing those in collaboration, which I think is a departure from the past. Just working with our parents in a sort of co-produced, collaborative fashion is absolutely key. But we need to change our way of working internally to make that happen. I've highlighted our providers because actually, I've talked earlier about we might want different providers, we want a slightly different service from our providers. We certainly want to improve quality. At previous recent surveys from parents, we had an 80% approval rating for our suppliers, which is the highest I think it's ever been. And so there's a lot of positivity around what's currently provided. But actually, there's always more to do. Quality could be better. We hear lots of stuff about language skills, training for providers, and we're looking at how we build that in and promote that. I think it would be wrong of me not to highlight parents and carers, actually. And I understand we've got to take parents and carers on a journey. That parents and carers often have a challenging view and experience in Surrey, and the council's working so hard to change that. And hopefully in the next 12 months you'll see big changes around that. But actually, we often hear, I get parents come and talk to me, Lee, I'm entitled to this, and why aren't I getting it? But actually, when I explain, well, actually, no, sorry, it's your job, it's your duty to get your child to school. It's our job to assist you. But how we assist you can be different. So I want to work with parents and carers to build that trust, build that respect, that actually we move from I'm entitled to a situation of collaboration, where actually we're working, we're having a dialogue, we're communicating, and the whole thing just works much more smoothly. It's less confrontational, it's more restorative, and we want to work through that. So there's a role around mindset changes. So the next slide is around our future policy principles. So we know, I'm going to run through these, but these are the sort of key principles that we're thinking around we should be building into our policy. So we recognise that our policy should promote and develop independence where appropriate. Again, that statement of where appropriate. Providing clear assistant criteria for assistance. So, what are the thresholds? Who's entitled to what? Under what circumstances? And I think that's muddy and confusing in our current system. Increased support for parents to transport their own children and young people. This is something parents have asked for pretty loudly now. What are the means and mechanisms? And the reason this is here largely is that currently the county does everything or the parents do everything. There's no middle road. But we've had parents say to us, well, I could take my child to school in the morning, and I'd probably like to do that if you'd let me. But I can't bring them home because I can take them on my way to work, but I can't bring them home at 3 o'clock or 3:30. But what we also know is, parents would like to see that flexibility in the system. So, okay, maybe you take them in the morning and we bring them back. From a finance perspective, that helps the council cut 50% of its costs. It's good for the parent, it's good for the child, so everybody wins. And a lot of what we're trying to achieve here is that kind of win-win attempt. Increased support for social capital delivery. Social capital is a terminology, but it's around communities, wider families, everybody being involved in the delivery of transport. So, we've had parents come to our events, and they're sort of friends or networks, and say, well, we all live within half a mile of each other. We could pick each other's children up and take them to school if you allowed us, if you gave us the support to do so. And we want to progress that. This is again something parents have asked for, and we're keen to pursue that. The next ones are fascinating ones. These are around mainstream or your SEND child could be transported. Now, currently, if you have an EHCP or a statement, your SEND child would be, if you live over certain distances or mobility needs are met, then you may be entitled to SEN transport assistance. But we had a couple of parents now contact us and say, well, I have two children. This is a very common story. I have two children and I can't be in two places at once. I can't take my SEND child to their school in one part of the county, which is typically further away, and my mainstream child to their school as well. I can't be in two places at once. So this typically the county council then takes the SEND child currently, and parents take the mainstream child. We have been told quite a couple of times now that actually if you gave us the choice, I'd probably prefer to take my SEND child to school because they have more complex needs. I have less contact and communication with the school than I would like, because often we hear a lot that the taxi driver passes notes back and forth, and they're the conduit between the school and the parent often. And so I could, if I could drop them off in the morning, I could have it, or in the afternoon, or I could do this, and I could have better communication with the school. And because my child has more complex needs, that would be beneficial. We also heard, my mainstream child, I arrive at the school gate and they wave at me and they run off because they don't want to talk to me, that I'm not cool at the school gate. So in they run, and so I don't have that dialogue on a day-to-day basis, which I may benefit from for a SEND child. But our current policy is only for SEND children, essentially. So we would only provide transport for a SEND child. But actually, why? And actually, why we're thinking of, we want to try and potentially give parents the choice. So you have a child with an EHCP. Which one would you like transport assistance? And this can be good for both, because a child who might go to school with mum or dad won't need is unlikely to need an escort, and will be more calmer. Schools have told us children who arrive at school in the morning, delivered by their parents or carers, are naturally much better prepared to learn than any other child. So there's big benefits to that. And then the mainstream child, if we transported them, typically the distance is a lot less. So again, from a cost perspective, it's less costly for the council. But actually, this is good for everybody. It gets both children to school. It gives more support to the SEND child. It gives parents more flexibility. So that's an option that we're keen to look at in terms of future policy. We want to develop a policy document that's in plain English. It's simple, it's clear, it's concise, it's straightforward, it's easy to understand. I kind of have a goal in my head of no more than 10-15 pages for this document. It doesn't need to be too long. We want to promote that collaboration between the county council and parents and carers, and build a system and a policy and a process that promotes that encourages that and develops that. Where that can be very effective and where parents have asked for it, then we would want to do that. And the last point here is around delivering independent travel training and support. So we know the county doesn't have currently an independent travel training service, and this is to train typically older young people, 11 plus, who could go to school by themselves, with the right support assistance by themselves. So we are looking to implement a service where the providers that we've been talking to would do maybe 3 assessments before they even decide whether a child is appropriate for training. So 1 at home, 1 at the school, and 1 out and about in the community with one of their parents. And from the 3 of those, decide whether their child is appropriate for travel training. Now, our data shows us that we believe there's 450 or so children, young people that cognitively could cope and do very well with travel training, and live close enough or on transport routes that would be successful. So we're looking to implement a scheme for around 110, 115 children, young people per year, hopefully from this coming September, and that's about a quarter of the total capacity that we think we could do. But let's start where we are, and we'll if we can grow it in the future if we wish. So in terms of that criteria that I was touching on, we need to be providing clearer criteria for entitlements and limits for transport assistance. I mean, the council is allowed to say actually what's beyond a reasonable amount of assistance from the public purse. We spend public money, we have a duty there. There are some needs potentially that actually the council is unable to meet those needs in terms of transport. I don't think there'll be very many of those at all, but occasionally it may happen. But I think we need to be really clear and honest and upfront about that, so at least parents know where they stand. And if we can't transport them, then how can we assist parents or others to transport them in a safe fashion? And I think that would be key. We need to provide clearer criteria around entitlement for solo transport. We get a lot of inquiries and requests from parents for their child to go travel solo. Some of that's due to time that they're in the vehicle, some of that's for many other reasons. But it's not clear, and actually decision making around solo transport and assistance is not consistent. So we need to progress on that. And then the levels of each type of assistance and what may trigger those things. So there is a role. Some parents have told us actually give me some help and some information, some guidance and advice, and I could do some of this myself. That's an area of support. Our independent travel allowance. So currently we have a parental travel allowance, and we are looking at really dramatically improving that scheme. And we're going as far as looking at things such as, actually, if we gave you a car, it's a bit bold, but if we gave parents and carers a vehicle and said, here's the car, you can take your child to school. A lease car might cost the council £3,000 or £4,000. Our current average spend is nearly 10,000. So it would be good for the council's financial situation, but also good for families, because you get the car all year round and you could take them to school, go on holiday, do things at the weekend, do other things with it. And we have heard from parents say, well, I do have a driving licence, I would love to take them to school, but I can't afford a car. And it might, in cases where it'll be cost effective, then that's an option that we are currently looking at. We're also looking at the mileage allowance and how we can support parents, so we can, whether we increase the rate, whether we've heard lots of comments around, currently when you pay mileage to get the child to school or get them back, but we don't return the parent to and from either, so the return journey doesn't get covered. Why not? Could we consider doing that? And we will look at that, and we're looking at that very carefully. And the previous presentation in February, which I was pointing to earlier, kind of touches on that a bit more. Centralised pickup assistance. So this is an area that parents raised as something to consider and pursue a bit further, and it's very much around developing independence, but most of the country is moving to a centralised pickup service. So you would drop your child at a local youth centre or community centre car park or a supermarket. I think one local authority has done a deal with a supermarket that they use the cafe in the supermarket, and all the children congregate there. They get on the bus, and at the end of the day they get picked up from the cafe. But a larger vehicle, a larger minibus, would collect all the children at a set time, say 8 o'clock in the morning, and drive them directly to school. So there's not lots of waiting time in doing lots of pickups. They go straight to school and then straight back, and then parents collect their child from the from that pickup point. And I say most of the country is doing this, or is implementing this across their areas. So it's an area the County Council is keen to trial, test and pursue. But we also heard from young people that actually, my bigger brother gets on a coach to school, and then I have to sit and wait for a taxi, and I want to be more independent. I want to be more like my bigger brother. So, this is a way of supporting that. And then there is the door-to-door assistance. There will always be a group of children, young people, who will need picking up from their front door. Children in wheelchairs, mobility issues, others that we will need to do that, and we understand that. And based on need, that would be available. But what is the criteria for accessing that? And the final point I put here is our exceptions criteria. Well, we have around 100 and so children and people currently who are in receipt of transport, but under our current policy aren't entitled to it. Now, it's really important to look at that information to understand why they may or may not be entitled, because actually what we know is some of those children are children in the care system, so the County Council is the corporate parent, so it's our duty to get them to school, so we provide that service. There are other families where we believe they are what I often call just about coping. The family situation is stressed, and transport systems have been provided to provide additional assistance, because if we took that away, there's a greater risk the child may go into the care system, and then that could cost 100,000 or so on average per year. So I think it's really important. We've been looking very detailed at that criteria. And I think about half of those children and people possibly shouldn't have transport, but have been awarded it, and that may need reviewing in the future. But at least it will be reviewed and be clear and upfront about why the criteria for that review. And there are others who have got it who we'd probably want to continue to supporting that and providing that assistance. So we need to provide that clear criteria. So in sort of broad summary, we're looking at developing a system that is delivered in collaboration with our parents and carers, that's co-designed with you, co-delivered with you where appropriate, where possible. And then the last two around evaluated with you and improved with you. And I think there'll always be work to do. The job will never be done in terms of there'll always be things we can tweak and improve and make better. And what we're committed to is listening to your comments, your feedback, your thoughts. We're going to run some working focus groups. And as we learn, we will adapt and evolve this over the next few years till we get it as good as it can be. But this is quite a departure from maybe some previous experience you may have had of the County Council's services. So I've got two more slides, and then I'm going to walk you through some case studies. So the first slide is around our educational health and care plan annual reviews. Now, we've heard lots from parents and carers about how annual reviews do or don't work very well. Sometimes I've heard that parents don't often get invited to the meetings, and the effectiveness of those meetings, or they're very short and rushed. So this slide is on the basis of the new EHCP process, and the annual review process is much improved and works as effectively as it should do. So what's on this slide? If the EHCP process works well, we'd like to consider we want to do this. If the EHCP review process doesn't work so well, then I guess anything on this slide is up for further negotiation or conversation. But the first one is around our annually we should be reviewing the need and nature of transport for the following year. And I think this is kind of being picked up by conversation with our Ofsted colleagues and parents and carers in our schools. And what currently happens now, a child might get a taxi at age 4 and they could still have a taxi all the way when they're 25, and there's little change under the current situation. But actually, it's not recognising the development of the child, it's not recognising the potential for independence, it's creating a dependency which we shouldn't be designing in. And what schools have told us is, Lee, we've got children coming here, we do lots of stuff around independence, and then they get in a taxi and they're driven home, and it kind of shatters the kind of work that we're trying to do in a joined up way. So how can transport blend with the education work that we're doing and the work that parents do in the home to be more consistent, more supportive, and a bit different maybe? So in the annual review paperwork, currently there should be 2 questions of, do you require transport next year? Yes, no. And if they have an escort, is that required? Yes, no. And that's not sophisticated enough, and we're looking at building in a more detailed review, a sort of assessment within there that actually just asks a few questions around, do we still need transport? Are they ready for independence? Whatever those questions may be, so that on an annual basis things are considered. We should be building in that preparation for independence, and what schools have said, we might know a child A in 2 years' time could be ready to travel independently. So we ought to be having conversations in the reviews that says in 2 years' time we want to be aiming to get them on the course for the independent travel. And it might take, hopefully it won't take that long, but it may take a while to prepare them and get them ready for it. So, but at the moment we don't think in that sense. We don't have that captured. The reviews of personal travel plans. I've got the next slide is all about personal travel plans. So I'll recap this in a second, but it's something that we're keen to implement. The EHCP needs to review the level and mode of assistance required. As I've said, there might be different levels and modes of assistance in the future, and what one's now appropriate. People do move home, things do change. We've got a duty to make sure that we monitor and provide the right assistance where appropriate. And then engaging schools in education and planning for transport assistance. So I kind of touched on that in the independent stuff. It's around schools being involved, the school curriculum blending with the transport offer and being more collaborative. So on the basis of EHCP reviews work better, these are things that we are keen to include. So the next slide is around the introduction of personal travel plans, often called personal independent travel plans now. And these are a mechanism essentially to capture what do we need to know about a child and their needs to enable them to travel successfully. So we are proposing that we produce a document, no more than hopefully a side of A4. And I'm sorry, but I'm actually proposing that parents and carers produce this document. We know there's a lot of paperwork in the SEN world, and we don't want to add to it particularly. And the reason I'm proposing parents and carers do it is because you understand your child's needs better than anybody else. No one understands a child better than their parents. And so schools have worked, we're going to be working with schools, and schools have agreed to sort of assist in terms of helping you put these together. But it is about developing a simple document that sets out the basic needs of a child and the transport assistance that is needed to know, so that we can plan that assistance effectively. And when I talk about basic needs, I'm not talking about chapter and verse of a child. I hear lots of times, please don't make me tell my story again. We don't want that. What we want to know is what does a provider need to know about your child to support them? So if they've got epilepsy or whatever, then that's probably appropriate to include. But what needs does your child have that actually a supplier would need to know to provide that assistance? And ask this question: what supports your child to travel successfully? So we've had some fantastic case studies throughout the project. The one I always laugh at and use a lot is around a young man, a driver, and a young man in solo transport. But the child was extremely anxious, getting very upset and was lashing out and was really, really unpleasant to watch by all accounts. And the driver then, after 2 weeks of driving this young man, the driver spoke to the parents and said, is there anything I can do to make this a better experience for him? And mum or dad said, well, what works for us you won't thank us for this, but try putting Barbie Girl on by Aqua on the radio and see if that makes any difference. So the driver goes, okay, drives home, downloads it onto his iPod Monday morning, plugs it in, plays the song, and the young man sat in the back of the car, absolutely dead still, staring out the window, bopping his head from side to side, absolutely enjoying it. And we know it's the really small and simple and very effective things that make the greatest difference. But they don't currently, I don't believe, they get captured enough to really make a difference. So in terms of providing a more personal and supportive service, and we want to give you the opportunity as parents and carers to inform and be part of that discussion. And also there's a role around these personal travel plans to support a child's independence. So, yes, when they start at 4, they may need one type of transport. When they're 18, they probably need a different type of transport. And actually, the personal travel plans will evolve through the years with them to continue that support. So again, this would be an opportunity for questions if you were at one of our events. On our website, please fill in the feedback form. You're very welcome to send us your comments. We will look at them very carefully, and we will consider those. You can get in touch with us, and my email address is at the end of this presentation. So I'm going to quickly now. I'm going to try and do this quite quickly, but I want to walk you through Max's story. So Max is this is a case study approach. Max is a cracking young man. Max is a very typical young person in Surrey from our experience. Max is 4 years old at this point. I will warn you, Max gets older as these case studies progress, and his needs also change as well as we go through this. But Max is 4 years old and plans to go to school 25 miles from home. The council currently plans to provide a taxi each way, morning and afternoon, to achieve our goal of supporting Max and his family to get him to school. I put in the grey bit here actually that the County Council is planning to produce a guide to SEND transport assistance for this September, hopefully. And this will be quite a book. It'll be a booklet that explains every step and stage, what to expect, when, where, what happens if something goes wrong, what should you do, all those kinds of questions. And so you won't have to go and navigate lots of web pages or find things. It'll be in a booklet in your hand, and that's something that we're looking to produce. And also the guide will explain how to complete a personal independent travel plan, the plan I was talking about in my previous slide. Give some guidance around doing that. So the first scenario is very typical of Surrey, really. So due to work commitments and the need to transport Max's sister to her school, the parents are asked the council for assistance to get Max to school. The council tenders for a route. Max goes on a route and he travels to school with one other child from the area. Because Max is only 4, he is provided with an escort, and that would be standard under current processes. So this is a very typical story. Parents they've got jobs, they can't take 2 children in the same place at the same time, so the council provides assistance. So in the future, Max's parents will be asked how they're planning to get him to school. Policy says, the law says it's their duty to make sure he gets his education, so we'll ask the question. And they explain that his father can take him to school on his way to work, but it's not possible to pick him up and bring him home. So Dad can take him in, but can't bring him back. So what the council agrees is to put a bespoke travel scheme in place for Max. His parents don't need access to the travel allowance because actually it's on Dad's way to work, so Dad would do that mileage anyway. The council would arrange for a return taxi to get Max home from school. Max is provided with an escort on his return journey, but he doesn't need one when he's with his mum or dad. So this is a real collaborative approach that we're trying to adopt. So Max gets to school, but actually his parents can do some of it quite naturally and easily, and would like to do it because actually they then get that communication with his school. And in partnership with the family, the council works with you to get Max back and make sure he gets home safe at the end of the day, and we provide the right level of assistance and support. So this scenario now sort of steps up a gear. The other child that goes in the same car currently as Max is Sarah. There's little Sarah in the top. And they live near each other. Their parents know each other, and they know each other well. And actually what Sarah's family and parents agree is that actually Max's dad can take both of them to school. They live a few doors away or however far apart. And actually Max's dad picks up Max and Sarah and takes them both to school. Because Sarah is not is different to different family to Max, actually then Dad would be entitled to access the travel allowance scheme, and we would pay the mileage to support Sarah and Max to both get to school. And then on the return journey, the council does the return journey again for both of them, and again the escort will be provided for Max as he's younger. And so in this case, this is the sort of what I was talking about, the social capital. So actually this is where parents working together to actually get children to school. Now, we understand there are some challenges around, do we need to start doing criminal record checks on everybody, and the jury is still out on how that will work. But this is about communities and local networks supporting each other to get children to and from education, and the council doing its bit to support where it can. So then scenario B3 sort of steps this up. So again, Max and Sarah both travel to school. Max's dad takes them. But actually it comes to light that Sarah's mum doesn't work on a Monday or a Friday, so actually she could pick them both up from school on those afternoons and bring them home. So the council then agrees to pay Max's family to take both children to school, and Sarah's parents to bring the two of them home in the afternoon. And then a taxi is provided on the Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, the sort of middle 3 days that mum isn't working. And again, this is very good for everybody. This gets mum to the school and talking to the vet school and that contact. It helps with Max as well. And from a fiscal perspective, from a financial perspective for the council, actually now we're only providing the expensive support on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. So this is again a bit of a win-win approach that we want to achieve. And actually this is something that parents have said, look, we would really like this, please allow us, please give us the mechanisms, the support to do it. It may not work for everybody, but it's certainly something to consider. And then progressing this again, so Max's parents again are asked how they're going to get him to school. They explain that having two children, they've got Max and now his sister Sally, they can't take them both to school at the same time. Again, very common story. Sally attends the local primary school down the road, and is older than Max, but so the council offers Max's parents the choice of transporting either Sally to school or Max. And if we took Sally, then they would have the time and space to take Max to school. Due to Max's needs, the parents are happier transporting the Max themselves, so what the council does is essentially allows them to take Max to school, and the council takes Sally to school. I kind of touched on this a little earlier as an example of our thinking. So this is where mainstream or SEND child could get the assistance. So I'm going to change this one now to scenario D1. We recognise that Max needs a good education. His parents have been looking at schools 25 miles away from him, and that's not unusual in Surrey in some circumstances. Ideally, they would like a closer school, but this isn't available. The transport team, we have Max's personal independent travel plan, and we're in discussion with the admissions team about what sort of assistance package can be put in place. And we ask if there's a suitable school that's closer, and we try and identify schools that are closer, and we work out that actually there are a couple of schools that might be more local, and Cherry Tree Lane is where Max goes. It's only 5 miles from Max's address, so we provide transport assistance. This is a sort of a longer term scenario where we are working with our colleagues to help schools develop a broader range of needs in which they can support, so that children don't have to travel quite so far away to get to their education. Not ideal for current young people, because if you're in a school and you're settled, we're not going to be driving as transport to be changing, moving children from schools. But certainly new children coming into the system, actually the system can be built and designed much better. Scenario E is progressing a little more. So Max needs to get to school. But his parents can't do both runs. So what now? Now Max is booked onto the Purple bus route. So this is a Send bus service that it's a dial-a-ride service. So this would be done by your traditional dial-a-ride provider. So it might normally be seen on the roads taking sort of elderly residents to day centres or hospital appointments. And Claire's the driver and Simon's the escort, and the bus meets them at 8:20 every morning outside the local youth centre. This is not very far away from where Max lives, and Claire, the driver, has a key to the youth centre. They can go in, use the toilets. If there's any problems, they can use the sofas and sit down or whatever they need to do. And then at 8:30, the bus will leave for school. The bus will arrive at 9 o'clock, ready for the school day, and goes directly to school. There are 3 children on the bus that need support from Simon, but he's ready and able to ensure all of the 8 children that are on this route have a fun time travelling to school. They're singing songs, they're doing whatever works, using those personal travel plans to inform Simon of things that could work really well. And at the end of the school day, it's done in reverse. So Claire and Simon again pick them up, take them back, drop them at the youth centre for 4 o'clock, and parents pick them up at that time. If anyone's delayed for any reason, then the youth centre is open, and if a parent doesn't manage to get there by 4 o'clock, well, then they can go into the youth centre, play pool, sit down, whatever is appropriate, and be supported until the parent arrives. So again, this is quite a common story around the country, and is an area sort of just trying to help put that model across. Then the last one I'm going to show you is around our independent travel training scenario. So Max has been attending the school for 8 years. He's now 13. He's grown up a bit. He's doing really well. His school has been working with him on his independent skills, and this is followed up at home with his mum and dad. The parental guide talks around the new independent travel training offer, the ITT. And actually they talk about putting him on that program in 6 months' time. School does work to prepare Max and speak to him and get him ready. And then the trainer does the assessments, and then he's agreed to go on the program. And then over the next 6 weeks, actually the program we're looking at 6 to 12 weeks, but Max goes through that training program, does it really, really well, and is able to travel school on his own independently each day. And he uses an app on his phone, so we can, you and he and I can track his journey. Well, probably more you and him can track his journey to school, make sure he's okay. So this is just a few scenarios that just try to help visualise the things we're trying to achieve and where policy actually has a role in setting some of the frameworks. So again, at our events, we've asked these 4 questions of parents, and they've got into groups and had some conversations and written on post-it notes, and we've captured those comments. So ways to improve send transport assistance. The policy around assistance, and having heard what I've said to you today, what are your thoughts? What are your things you think we can go away and think about or improve it further? The one in green I think is really important are questions about the current approach which should be considered. So this is, what questions would you like us to go away and think about? So, are we working very closely with Family Voice Surrey, and they've been really good at saying, Lee, have you thought about, this child with this need living in the most rural part of the county, and how are we going to assist and support them? Are there questions you'd like us to take away and consider? And we will, very, very much like to hear from you. Again, fill in the form on the website and fill in the feedback process and send us your comments. The one in sort of blue, how to increase children and young people's independence via policy. We've got some ideas, and hopefully you've heard those, but are there other ideas that you've got that you think would be really good for us to look at or consider? And love to hear your thoughts and comments. And the one in purple, we had this at our February event, and the sheet that got filled in the most was what's working well now. There's a huge amount about transport that's working really well. There's also stuff that isn't, but there's a lot that works well. And actually what we want to do is capture what works well, because we don't want to lose that good stuff. We want to maintain that, we want to build on that, we want to use that as a springboard to improve further. So we're very keen to hear your thoughts and comments. So I'd ask you to fill in the form and send your comments back to us so we can take them on board. So that concludes the key presentation. There's my email address, so if you've got any issues or questions, you're welcome to send your comments to me. You're also welcome to write to the overall transport project, which would be send.transport@surreycc.gov.uk. So again, that's send.transport@surreycc.gov.uk. I'll just briefly explain what happens next. So we are concluding in the next day or two our final engagement events with parents and carers on our webinars. We will then start to sit down and craft a draft policy. We're very keen to engage parents in some working groups around some of the key elements of that policy and the kind of overall shape and wording, and make sure it's clear and it's not full of jargon and bureaucratic or acronyms that no one understands. So we want to make that really straightforward. So on the form that I'm encouraging you to fill in, there's an opportunity for you to say, I'd like to be part of a working group, and click the boxes for the topics you're interested in, and we'll do a ballot and we'll draw out a group of parents to come work with us. We will draft a policy for probably the beginning of July, and then we'll run a 6-week consultation over the summer, and it'll go to our cabinet at the end of August, beginning of July, beginning of September for approval, and then that policy will go into force. Now, interestingly, in terms of policy legislation, the transport policy has to be published around the 1st of September, but it won't physically or practically come into full force until the following September. It's one of the only things in local government that it requires 12 months notice, and that's simply because in mainstream parents will be picking where their child's school is going to be in the sort of September, October, November period, and they need to understand what transport assistance would be available. Slightly less so in SEN because it's often decided earlier, but we would be publishing that policy. And what we will do is, we know parents want to adopt a more flexible, more collaborative, more co-designed approach with us. So we will allow parents to take either the old policy or the new. We encourage people to use the new one because we think will be a much better process. And we'll just get parents to sign a waiver that says I'm happy to use the new policy sooner than the 12 months. But that is what we'll be doing. Also over the summer, we'll be publishing a document. We'll be publicly publishing a document around the future of transport, and it will detail the future operating model that we are proposing to implement. And again, we'll be running consultation on that for probably the same 6 weeks, and there'll be opportunities for feedback and comments, and then we will digest that, and if we need to make some tweaks, we would absolutely look to do that. We will also over the summer be running another round of engagement. So there'll be 4 more public events for parents and carers to come along to. There will also be more webinars for parents and carers to come along to, and we'd be very keen to get your thoughts and your comments on those events. And then from September, the model and the policy, as I say, will be available for implementation. We understand that the needs and complexities of children are such that you can't just implement a whole new process from the 1st of September. It just won't work. So it'll take maybe 1 or 2 years probably to make this model a reality in full force. And actually, the planning is underway now to prepare for September's operations. So if your child's having transport, it'll be very typical, be very familiar to you in September, because this whole new process won't have been in existence. But the following year will be a bit different, and the following year will be even more. So it'll grow over time. So that's the end of this presentation. I'd like to thank you for your time. It's taken nearly 55 minutes, so I apologise it's taken a long time, but there's a lot of detail that we want to get across, and we want to give you the opportunity to hear from us directly our early thinking in terms of our policy. Please send us your comments, please get involved, and have a good day. Thank you very much.